What's up, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Talkin Grizz. This is our off-season series. We're going to talk to media from around the league. So joining me now from somewhere around Boston is the Boston Celtics beat writer for MassLive, Tom Westerholm. Welcome. Thank you for being here. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
All right. We got to get right to it because we talked about it. There's two options that Boston really has floating around right now. And that's one, stay with that number 14 pick, which obviously they're comfortable with. We saw them get Romeo Langford last year at that pick. And then number two is trade up. So let's start with number one. If Boston was to stay in that number 14, they got to pick a name. They got to draw someone, bring them to the roster for next year. What names have been floating around in that spot?
So there's been a few guys, mostly guards, who are floating around there. The Celtics really need a backup scoring and a backup point guard. So, we've seen names like R.J. Hampton floating around, obviously a super athletic guard out of, played overseas last year in New Zealand. And we've also seen, guys like Tyrell Terry, just a really good shooter who can score off the dribble, can score out of the pick and roll. So I think that those are probably the types of names that they would be looking at around 14 are guys who they can hopefully come in, give them some offense right away. They really needed that punch, especially during the playoffs, in that second unit. So that would be kind of where I anticipate them looking at number 14 if they stay put, which, like you said, is pretty fluid.
Okay, so just a quick follow-up question to that one. I said there was only two, but now I'm adding in another. Of those two names, and we know a lot about each of them because they have been around and they've been playing, which do you think would fit Boston better?
Well, and to be clear, those are two of several names that they could be considering at 14. Me personally, I think Tyrell Terry would be really good for them just because he can shoot so well. They really needed that floor spacing. We know he can shoot off the dribble and off the catch. So if you just have somebody who as a rookie can come in and hit three-pointers, that's big. That guy can contribute right away. So if you can get somebody who can contribute right away and maybe develop into somebody who can help you out down the road in a much bigger role, I think there's a lot of, I think that's a really attractive option. So for me, Terry makes a lot of sense in that position.
All right. So then number two comes around and there's this whole thing about finding something to trade, whether it's picks now, picks later, names running around, trading up into the draft. Walk me through what the heck that would include and why and how.
Well, the reason that it's so complicated is because there's so many options. So the Celtics have three picks, number 14, number 26, and number 30. One thing that we know they've tried to do is trade all three of those picks to move up because, three roster spots is a lot to try to fill just via the draft. Like that just brings you right up against a crunch. So they've tried to move those three picks by themselves to move up. That's going to be tough to do. So what they could do is, trade number 14 and maybe another valuable piece, maybe another one of their promising young players, try to move up that way. Or they could just take the 14th pick and try to package 26 and 30 to move up, just higher in the first round with those two as well. Both are certainly things that are floating around. It's going to be complicated no matter what. It's one of those things where it's almost an embarrassment of riches, right? Like you want to have as many first round picks as possible, but having a lot of them can really complicate things. So I wouldn't anticipate them moving up into like the top 3, top 5, but if they can get up to like 7, 8, 9, I think that's a pretty positive outcome for them.
Okay, play just a little game with me before we go. You are Danny Ainge right now. You're making a pick. Is there a situation that you see that could be the most attractive, and who would you be going after if that happened?
So if they can get themselves up into the 7, 8, 9 range, I think that it would be really positive for them to target somebody like Onyeka Okongwu out of USC. Super versatile potential center. Could be a long-term answer for them at center, which is something they need. I also really like Killian Hayes, really talented guard, really talented scorer and passer. And I think that he's somebody, like we were talking about before, who could give you some scoring punch right now, but who also down the road could develop into something, maybe a starter, maybe a starting point guard down the road as well. So if I were them and I was, if I was able to get up into that range, that would be kind of what I'm targeting. But, like you said, it's going to be hard to do. It's going to be really complicated. And honestly, I'm kind of glad I'm not Danny Ainge because there's a lot of tough decisions coming up here.
The good thing is it's about a week away, so we're going to have some answers soon enough. You'll have more to write about. Where can we find all of your work?
Yeah, so you can find all my Celtics work on masslive.com/Celtics, and you can follow me on Twitter at Tom_NBA. And a little plug for my podcast, you can listen to the Geno Time podcast. Check that out.
There we go. I just followed you on Twitter this morning. I'll go give your podcast a listen. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. This is It's going to be a lot. Boston's one of those ones where it was tricky even preparing for this interview because I'm like, what the heck are they going to do? There's too many options almost. So thank you for your insight.
I feel like it's that every offseason with these guys. It's crazy. Thank you for having me on.
All right, Grizzlies fans, you can always get more on grindcitymedia.com.